Thanks everyone to be here. In about 10,000 years ago, as we know, on the fertile lands of the Middle East, the agriculture started, and this triggered the development of many civilizations and empires. So in the coming panel, we are going to talk about the food security, the political economy, specific in Syria. So we're going to see how is the situation today. First with Myriam, who is going to speak about the food security in Syria and some reforms that have affected the agricultural industry. And with Max, we're going to talk about the rural development and policies that have been adopted by the government. I don't want to take too much time, so I'll leave the floor to Myriam. Thank you.
Good morning. Allow me to present my gratitude to the National University of Singapore Middle East Institute, to Professor Sluglet and to Dr. Linda Mattia for inviting me this morning to present a paper among this distinguished assembly of scholars. My paper today will present the evolution of the Syrian self-sufficiency. Okay, thank you. To food security and to hunger as a weapon from 2000 to 2016. Self-sufficiency has been a pillar of Syria-based economy from the agrarian reform launched in 1958 until the neoliberal economic opening of the country in the 2000s. After Turkey, as you know, Syria had the most productive agricultural sector in the Middle East and was self-sufficient from 1991 until 2008, until the drought. It accounted for 1/3 of the gross domestic product, including the agrarian, the industrial transformation, and employed 1/3 of the working population. Syria became self-sufficient in wheat in 1991, thanks not only to the state irrigation project, but also for the multiplication of private wells, for most illegal. In Jazeera, 80% of irrigation depended on underground wells and rivers. The overuse of underground water resource led to a depletion of the water table and the death of historic rivers such as the Balir and the Khabur that dried up in 2001. But even more important than mismanagement of water resources, the drought and the drought of 2008, I'm going to present it. My main thesis is that Syria went through a form of counter-agrarian reform starting from 2000. I have published 2 papers about the subject of state farm distribution in Raqqa Governorate in 2001 during a conference in Cologne, for instance. But today, I will mention another fundamental law and reform that was not enough taken into consideration. It's the new agrarian law 56 of 2004, which allowed landowners to terminate farming contracts. I had published a paper recently in the book directed by Dr. Hinbush and Tina Zintel, Syria from Reform to Revolt, published at Syracuse University Press in 2015. Since the war started in 2011, especially after the emergence of the Islamic State 2013, food and water have become weapons and leverage to political change for the government and for the Islamic State. The Islamic State controls 2/3 of the wheat reserve and put taxes on transportation to transport wheat from the Jazeera to Aleppo, Damascus, to the inhabited city. Since 2015, even the Islamic State has started its own self-sufficiency policy, as we will see, and does not allow the farmer to sell any more their production to the regime. Access to food is a main problem faced by the majority of Syrians, after, of course, the fighting and the war, both in the state-controlled area because of inflation and scarcity, and within the 19 besieged area where people are victims of war profiteers and black market. And I will discuss this in the third part of this presentation. I have like that, or like that, like that. Okay, no. Okay, this is the first. No, the second one, please. Okay, this one. This is the table. I will follow this presentation. Okay. In Homs and in the Eastern Ghouta, citizens managed to produce bread under civilian control. I will present that. And UN humanitarian food assistance is mainly conveyed by the regime, while Gulf charities are reaching opposition-led areas. Until 2014, UN food assistance was shipped to Latakia and distributed along with the Syrian regime, and it was highly contested. The World Food Program was highly contested because of that. And on July, as you know, July 14, 2014, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution 2165, authorizing cross-border and cross-line delivery of humanitarian aid from Ramsa, from Jordan, and from Turkey, and from Iraq also, without the Syrian Arab Republic government approval. So I will follow these three parts, and I will mention that I will base this presentation on field work conducted in Syria from 1996 and 2007. Then, starting from 2006, personally, I start working on Jordan. I have my two lives, Syria first and Jordan after. I continue reading on Syria, having contact with Rakawi friend through Facebook, and I've been using also All for Syria, Akhbar al-Sharq, that published, this is based in London, published daily nearly 80 pages of information. We can discuss the source, but it has a search motor now, and we can have inside the city, inside the country. And also I would like to quote several important reports, and especially two papers published in Foreign Policy by Martinez and Eng in 2015 that were really enlightening, and that included the link to each of the Arabic paper sources they've been using. And I went to also following them to the sources to also give more element to my argument starting from 2011. As you know, it's not possible for me, it was not possible to go anymore to Syria. So I won't be so long about the first and second part, but I think it's important to remember that Syria, since 1958, had the decision so it was a socialist decision to counter the West by being self-sufficient and also build its own legitimacy among poor peasant and sharecroppers. The government used three tools to reach self-sufficiency. The first was land reclamation, so the Euphrates project. The second was seeds improvement, so through the Shami variety of wheat, through Icarda. And the third was subsidies to fertilizer and fuel. In the context of the economic opening, starting from 2000, the self-sufficiency policy turned to a food security with focus on producing goods of relative advantage, exporting surpluses in order to cover the importation of goods not locally produced. So the agriculture had two objectives: reach self-sufficiency and boost exportation. The production was highly subsidized, as I mentioned. In 2011, 2% of the GDP was subventioned to buy wheat. Wheat was bought at a higher level than the world prices, of course. This is well known, but it's good to just remind that all the production was, all the wheat chain production was controlled by the state. So from seed, fertilizer, to the buying by Hubub gathered. You had 140 silos, storage capacity of 4 million tons, and this was basically the production of Syria. Syria used to produce up to 4 million tons, okay? 2.5 million were used for consumption, 1.5 million were exported to Algeria, Tunisia for half, and to Italy. So it was the Durham rate with very good qualities. Italy to do pasta, semolina in Algeria. The surface was 1.5 million hectare for wheat, 1.3 million hectare for barley for the livestock. Livestock, 22 million sheep. Now we are, then after the drought, 50 million, and now we are around 7-8 million sheep. I will come to that. Okay. I have maybe next slide, please, sir. So I took statistic. I had a bunch of statistics from long time on agricultural. Each time I open, sometime I open from the website, I download the Syrian statistics, some Census Bureau statistics, and I added the FAO estimation in order to have, and I will comment this. As I told you, you reach more than 4 million tons, and then it went down to 1.8 2014, 2.5 2015. But as I say, the problem is not to produce now. The problem now is to transport that to market, to transform into flour, because the milling capacities has been reduced because of the war, and then to the storage of wheat. Storage of wheat became a major problem now in Syria. Maybe I should go faster, maybe. I'm thinking, I'm long. I have 20 minutes. Mais là, j'ai parlé combien là? J'ai parlé... Okay, I'm a bit long. Okay, I will not enter in all, just water. Water is important. There was mismanagement of water resources. It's very well known. A third of water, a third of the Syrian water was exported through cotton. You know, this is well known, but it's good to remind that. Wells, private wells developed for two reasons: because of increased salinization and pollution of the Euphrates. We forget that, but the increase in production had bad consequences on even the quality of water. Drainage of, you know, you have to irrigate, then you have to drain. If you don't drain, you have salinization, because especially of gypsum coming out on Jazeera. Okay? So if you do this drainage and you drain the water to the Euphrates, you have a higher salinization, which becomes a problem. So you have a multiplication of illegal wells by 2 from 1999 to 2007, from 135,000 illegal private wells in Jazeera to 213 wells. Okay. In 2007, Syria consumed 19 billion cubic meters of water, which was 3.5 billion more than the amount of water replenished naturally, and the deficit was coming from groundwater. So now I will come to my second part. What happened during, so if we come back before, sir. Yes, okay. What happened during the counter-agrarian reform and the drought? So as I mentioned, we can refer to the book published by Dr. Hinbush. Just to remember a factor that was not so well taken into consideration, Samir Aita, the economist, mentioned that. It is that from 2002 until 2008, Syria lost 40% of its agricultural force, dropping from 1.5 million to 800,000 workers. So this is a sign of a crisis of the sector. And we have to understand what were the reasons of this drop and reduction of the workforce in agricultural sector. Very important, and the context in which the uprising came. I suggested, and we have also Diana Sarkis Fernandez, who wrote, she's a Syrian Spanish lady, she wrote on Tartus, she wrote a PhD on in anthropology about the farmers in the greenhouses in Tartus. And she also identified the law. I saw the law while reading Akhbar al-Sharq. I was reading parliament discussion about agrarian reform law. And this is very important because it reminds us of what happened in Egypt, that was studied by Rebush, Rim Saad, that is the counter-agrarian reform. What is it? The end of all the system, 52 agrarian reform by Nasser, 92 the law that stopped the major reform was not about property. Always in the Middle East, it's not about property. It's about modes of exploitation and control over water. You always, okay? So agrarian relation law was very important. In 52 in Egypt, in 58 in Syria, it introduced the first written contract. Of course, you had illiterate farmers, so it was oral contract. For the first time, the contract included a third of the production guarantees to the farmer, which was never done before. The law 2004 ended that contract and allowed landowner to terminate after 3 years all tenancy contract and replace them with temporary contract. Then there was a lot of discussion. There was indemnities, of course. So the indemnity were calculated of 2% of the land value per year worked and cannot be less than 20% of the land value and not more than 40% of the land value. There was discussion at the parliament because half of the population were illiterate in Raqqa, Hasake. So how could you have a written contract? So then they introduced the fact that if your neighbor can testimony for you, you would have benefited from this. So we can discuss. I think that this is an element of this drop, along with mismanagement of water and. Okay. So this is now drought. Maybe I will. It's well known. Just mention that the drought 2008 was very important in the history of the country. It is comparable to the 58 drought. 1958, 1961 led to the death of half of the livestock in the country. And it's a major transformation of the society with it was a shock on the nomadic farming and the way of life. 2008, what happened? It was not even more drier, but what happened, it is that the water table went so down that it was not possible anymore to use water from the traditional way to compensate through wells because it went very down. So this is important. 2008 also, we must remember, is the world economic crisis, and all the Middle East countries removed subsidies on fuel. It was terrible because you were not able to bring fodder, to bring water to your flocks in the Badia, and this was also terrible for the. Okay, well, this is well known now, but good to remember. Okay. So, in order to mitigate the impact of the drought and higher diesel prices on agriculture, in 2008 the government raised all public wages by 25% and established the agricultural support fund. Now I will come to the third real transition, the context in which the uprising went. Food as a weapon and hunger policy in the time of war, 2011-2016. In the context of drought and world economic crisis, the Arab Spring turned into a civil war in Syria since 2011. More than 250,000 Syrians have been killed in fighting. 4.7 million Syrians have crossed the border to find refuge in neighboring countries, in Turkey, in Jordan. 12 million Syrians are in need in food assistance within Syria. The agriculture sector has entered in a vicious circle because of rural migration to city, destruction of the irrigation facilities, sometimes even crops were burned in the field in Hama. Flocks were smuggled and robbed. And by the way, it's a problem for Jordan because flocks entered without proper vaccination, creating some problem on the own stock in Jordan. Of course, as you know, bakery was targeted, silos were targeted, mills in Aleppo were targeted. This is well known, but can we have, please, yes, okay, so this map, alors, I'm sorry I had no time to prepare a map for this conference, and, but I think it's important just to remind that basically the production area of the country, 2/3 of the wheat is produced in Jazeera, donc Raqqa, Hasakeh, the Resort. It's under Islamic State control. And now you had 140 silos. Now you have only 21 that are inside the Syrian regime hands. And I wrote this article, very interesting. There's a journalist who said that she managed to have contact with people in Raqqa governorate, telling that the engineer managing the silo are allowed by the Islamic State to go to Damascus to take some training and come back to manage the silos, because it's so strategic that if you do not have trained engineer, you take the risk of having the fungus and disease and mold on the wheat. So it was interesting, I think. But even because this is a problem of training. So there is a geography of the production to do. So basically, the area, so with 65% of the population of Syria is under regime-held areas. These people are benefiting from subsidized wheat. I'm going to speak about the prices of the bread. The government managed to buy wheat, but it has to pay a very high price. It used to be $130 per ton, and now, 2015, the government tried to buy at $200 per ton. But on the other side, the Islamic State is buying more than $200 per ton. In North Homs, and I will develop that because I think it's a very interesting example, in the besieged area in North Homs, farmers managed to produce wheat, and this wheat was bought more than $207 per ton. I will come in 2015. Farmland and orchards on the Syrian coast and of Suwaida have not been affected, continue to export fruit and vegetable to Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon. Suwaida became the main agro-industry center in the south of Syria after Daraa. Daraa used to be the center, now it's Suwaida. I heard from UN expert working for UNHCR that some farmer in Turkey managed to enter and sow their field in January, hoping to have a barley harvest, and managed to go and harvest in May and June. I read also that because of half of the population of Daraa flew to Zaatari camp, some villages south of in Daraa governorate are farmed by displaced farmers for Homs and Damascus. It's well known that that tolls have been put on the roads to transport wheat from Raqqa to Damascus. The Islamic State at the beginning put a 20% tax on each of the production and 10,000 Syrian pound on each truck. But starting from 2015 was a very good year for the precipitation, and so the production went up to 2.5 million tons. But the problem is that 2.5 million tons, which is supposed to be what Syrians need to eat, cannot be transported, cannot be transformed into flours, and had a problem of storage. So it is there is a need of 800,000 tons to feed the Syrian population now, and wheat is imported by the regime from Russia. Also, the problem is that some farmer in Deir ez-Zor, in Raqqa, prefer to sell their own wheat to Turkey, to Iraq, for double the price. Some fighters are trying to block them to do so, but there is all an economy at war, and it's not possible. I would like to, before finishing, mention some form of resistance. 2 minutes. Bon, alors, in north of Homs, so in besieged area north of Homs, since September 2015, with the assistance of Gulf donor, and especially Qatar, and especially RAF, which is Chair Sani Ben Abdallah Foundation, RAF, and this I met with them in Amman because they are very active giving support to the Syrian refugees through the Islamic NGOs and the Salafi NGOs in Syria, in Jordan. But they are also very active to bring money and support several projects in Jabhat al-Nusra areas. For instance, north of Homs, they have been producing their own wheat, and I have. Can we go the next slide, please, sir? Yes, this is very important. It's bread prices across Syria. Now, so the bunch of wheat of bread was 15 Syrian lire a pound before 2011. Now it reached 80 Syrian pounds. This is in August 2015. It's a document from Syria Direct. It shows very high prices in Deir ez-Zor, as you can see. More than 3,500 for the kilo of bread. The Ghouta, besieged area, 800. Raqqa, the double, 200. And Deir ez-Zor report says that it's very paradoxical, but because the Islamic State, and also, by the way, Hezbollah, I don't know, spoke about Hezbollah, block war profiteer and smuggler to enter goods and wheat and bread, it's even harsher on the population that cannot have access to bread. This is paradoxical, huh? But so Deir ez-Zor population is really in dire conditions. And maybe because I'm asked to finish, I will. So I finish on Homs, north of Homs. They manage to produce bread and wheat and to buy it from the farmer at high prices. They manage through receiving money from Qatar. But in this year, in June 2016, they didn't manage. They didn't receive any more because RAF went through ACU, and ACU was banned by USAID to distribute wheat. So they didn't manage to distribute, to buy the wheat. And Homs local government, the new government of Homs governorate, managed at this time to reduce the price of bread by half, which was an interesting endeavor, but okay. I need to conclude. So, before concluding, I would like to mention something related to that. It is distress livelihood and coping mechanism. Basically, a Syrian family that would own 20,000 Syrian pounds as a salary needs now to pay a food basket of 30,000. This is average within Syria, within the regime control area. But in Deir ez-Zor, it goes up to 110,000 for the basic food basket. So, as a conclusion, because I need to conclude, since the war started in 2011, and especially after the emergence of Islamic State, food and water became weapons and leverage to political change for both the government and the Islamic State. The government is trying to maintain control over the wheat chain production, and need to reach agreement with the Islamic State, as 2/3 of the wheat is produced in the Jazeera and half is stored in the Raqqa Governorate. In the context of high inflation, farmers prefer to sell their production illegally to Iraq, Turkey for double the price. Food became the main preoccupation of the population under very high speculation. In the besieged area, population is suffering to feed itself. Some manage to produce wheat in the Ghouta, and for most of them, they are victims of war profiteers who play with the black market. Paradoxically, in the area under the Islamic State, the absence of black market is even worse for the population. But for centuries, Syria agricultural community had resilience and managed to, even without state assistance, manage to produce, even in rudimental condition, wheat. So this have been protecting the population from starvation, but the threat now is about the storage of the production, as each farmer is stockpiling his own wheat without possibility of accessing market and storage facilities.